Andrei Chikatilo, the real Citizen X, also known as the Rostov Ripper. For 12 years, Citizen X had been a ghost haunting the railway lines and forest strips of the USSR. The state insisted that serial killers were a capitalist disease that didn't exist in their perfect society, and that denial gave Andrei Chikatilo exactly what he needed: a license to kill over 50 people while the world looked the other way. Today, we are peeling back the Iron Curtain to look at the real Citizen X, the Rostov Ripper, the Rostov Butcher, also known as the Red Ripper. Hi there, everyone. Welcome back to our podcast. This is Start with the Weird with Reka, Roderick, and Stacy. And today we are going to continue with Andrei Chikatilo. If you haven't listened to the first two parts, it's available on YouTube, so definitely give it a listen. And this is the third part, and now all three of us are here.
Hello.
Hi, guys. That was awfully cheery for a podcast like that.
It was, wasn't it? Hello. A bit more down.
Just to let everyone know, some content may be graphic in nature and listener discretion is advised. Each episode is created with deep respect for the victims, their families, and their loved ones. And this episode isn't going to be as graphic as the first two, but still, just be aware that it's a very sensitive topic. So just to do a little recap, we were talking about Andrei Chikatilo, who is probably the worst serial killer ever existed, and he was active for about 8 years, almost 12 years to be honest, and they haven't caught him because he was part of the Communist Party. We did the first part with Roderick and we did the second part with Stacy, and now we got to the part where we will be talking about his arrest. Anyone has anything to add?
The only thing I wanted to add was I feel this has been the hardest one we spoke about so far.
Definitely, and possibly the worst as well that we will ever talk about. The part where we start is where he actually got arrested and his trial. So the surveillance operation on Chikatilo began in earnest on 14th of November 1990. The police watched as he moved through the transit system, stalking the same patterns he had used for years. On trains and buses, he was seen targeting isolated women and children, attempting to strike up conversations. If they walked away or shut him down, he didn't panic. He simply waited a few minutes and moved on to the next potential target. By the 20th of November, after nearly a week of tracking his every move, the authorities watched him leave his home. He carried a large jar, stopping at a park kiosk to fill it with beer before wandering through, is it Novocherkassk? That's it. His behavior remained predatory as he attempted to engage several children he encountered along the street. The end came as he stepped out of a cafe. 4 officers in civil clothing moved in. There was no struggle, no dramatic escape, and no resistance. Chikatilo simply let them snap the handcuffs on and let him into an unmarked police car. Once he was in custody, Chikatilo claimed his innocence. He told the police they had the wrong man and even brought up his 1984 arrest, acting like he was being harassed for a crime he'd already been cleared of. The act fell apart when they stripped him. They found a deep wound on the middle finger of his right hand that he tried to fix himself with iodine. Medical examiners took one look and confirmed it was a human bite. This tied him directly to the struggle with Viktor Tishchenko. Unlike many of the younger victims, Tishchenko was 16 and strong enough to fight back. The scene in the woods showed how violent the encounter had been. Tishchenko had managed to break Chikatilo's finger and bite off the nail before he was killed. Chikatilo was so afraid of being caught that he never went to a doctor, carrying the infection on his hand, right into the interrogation room. The search of Chikatilo's things turned up a folding knife and 2 pieces of rope. After the police took a blood sample, they moved him to a cell inside the Rostov KGB headquarters. They planted an informer in the cell with him, hoping the man could get Chikatilo to talk. So I just want to stop here for a second. I know Stacey wasn't here when we were talking about Peter Kovac, but Peter Kovac also had a victim who would fight back to the level that he would get into a car accident. He would drive into a chain with his van. And that's pretty much because of this, how fierce this woman was. That was the only reason he was caught. And here it's pretty much the same, that this kid who was 16 years old sort of helped the case to arrest this guy. So even though he died, I think we should take a moment to honor his bravery that he fought back and helped the investigation. Formal questioning started the next day, led by Issa Kostoyev. The investigators didn't go for a direct attack. Instead, they tried to convince Chikatilo he was mentally ill and needed medical treatment. The goal was to make him believe that a confession would lead to an insanity plea rather than a prison sentence. The police were desperate for a statement because their evidence was mostly circumstantial. Under Soviet law, the clock was ticking. They only had 10 days to charge him or let him walk. Now, to talk about the blood evidence, so we talked about this, I think it was in the last episode, that they did catch him in 1984, but they did a blood test and they checked it against a semen test, and his blood was a different type than his semen, and he belongs to that 20% of the population.
How just lucky must he have been to be part of that 20%? Like, if it was anybody else, they would have found them, but it was just like luck was on his side.
I was just thinking about it. Like, I imagine him being so confused when he thought that maybe they got him and then they didn't, and he would be like, I wonder how that happened.
Yeah, it's quite funny in some level. He just belonged to this, it's called secretors. So 80% of the people are secretors, meaning their saliva and semen contain the same type as their blood, but the non-secretors is this 20% where it's different.
It's going to make him feel like so unstoppable as well, isn't it? Because he already thinks he's unstoppable because he's killed all these people, and on top of that, science is on his side. It must just give him like if there's a complex, isn't it? Is it a messiah complex, when you just think like you're above the law and nothing's ever going to happen? Like, this literally must have added to the fact that he thought, I'm never ever gonna get caught, because he even got caught, didn't he, at like the train station, our last talk, and he got away, like just walked past. Like, every opportunity, this guy has never been caught.
Also, I think it's interesting that what Stacey said, that it probably gave him this power that, he's untouchable and unreachable, but it's probably contradicted the way he felt in his life, that he was basically a loser and he was impotent and all that. And then when this happened, he was literally becoming this, well, I wouldn't say he felt like a god, but yeah, he felt untouchable and the perfect killer, probably.
Like he was finally good at something in his life.
Exactly. So the odds were playing to his favor, definitely. On the 21st of November, the blood test results came back. Chikatilo was type A. It was the same mismatch that had derailed the 1984 investigation, but this time the police weren't willing to let the physical and circumstantial evidence slide. They realized the type AB profile they had been chasing for years was based on semen samples taken from 14 different victims, not actual blood. To test a new theory, investigators forced Chikatilo to provide a semen sample. The results explained the decade-long failure of the manhunt. While Chikatilo's blood and saliva were type A, his semen tested as type AB. He was a non-secretor whose bodily fluids didn't match his blood, a rare biological trait that had effectively given him a get-out-of-jail-free card since the start of the killings. During the interrogation, Chikatilo wouldn't budge on the murders. He admitted to the sexual abuse of his students, likely seeing it as a lesser offense that he'd already been punished for in his career, but he denied the killings. Stacey, I don't think you have have been aware of this, or I don't know if you read that part, but yeah, basically he was fired from a couple of teaching jobs because he would be very inappropriate with his students. So he would be like touching himself in front of them or harassing.
I did read that as well. Yeah, very sick.
Absolutely. And not just one, but I think there was at least 2 teaching jobs that he had to leave. He spent his time in the cell writing essays for Kostoyev. While he avoided any direct confession in these papers, the writing style and the themes he focused on mirrored the psychological profile Dr. Buchanovsky had drafted 5 years earlier. He was effectively confirming the doctor's theories about his mind without admitting to the crimes. So, Roderick, you weren't here for this part, but basically the police didn't want to involve psychiatrist for a long time because obviously psychiatry was not a thing in the Soviet Union, but eventually they did get this guy Buchanovsky who wrote a 60 pages long psychological profile based on the murders and the patterns, and he basically described Chikatilo like, yeah, it's this guy. So even when he was arrested, they already had a psychological profile on him, yet that was still not enough to take him in.
So like Bukovsky was like Bukovsky? Did you say Bukovsky his name?
Buchanovsky.
So he was like a Soviet Spencer Reid.
Yes, pretty much, yes. So yeah, he just described him that he was impotent, he had a family, he had children, he was probably working in a job that would require him to travel, so he knew everything about this guy just based on the murders, yet they still didn't.
Really good.
He was really good, but they didn't really use his profile as an evidence because of the blood. Yeah. Outside of the writing, the pressure was starting to show. Kostoyev's aggressive questioning about the specific mutilations of the victims was making Chikatilo pull back. The police informer in his cell reported that Chikatilo was becoming increasingly defensive, complaining that the investigator was obsessing over the gory details of the killings. The psychological game was reaching a stalemate, with the 10-day legal limit on his detention rapidly approaching. They put a mole, so to speak, next to him in the cell, and they had 10 days to basically prove that he's the killer, and they were on day 9, I think, and it still didn't confess anything, just to recap. So the confession. On the 29th of November, Burakov and Fetishov brought in Dr. Buchanovsky to break the deadlock. Buchanovsky sat across from Chikatilo and began reading sections of 65-page, sorry, it was 65, not 60, psychological profile he had written years earlier. He wasn't just presenting evidence, he was describing Chikatilo's own mind back to him. The effect was immediate. Within 2 hours, Chikatilo's composure shattered. He burst into tears and admitted to Buchanovsky that he was the killer they had been looking for. They talked late into the evening, and by the end of the session, the doctor informed the investigators that the wall was down. Chikatilo was ready to give a formal confession. Using the notes Buchanovsky provided, Kostoyev drafted a formal murder charge on 29th of November. The timing was critical. It was the final night of the 10-day legal window. The authorities had to charge Chikatilo before being forced to release him. The interrogation resumed the next morning. According to the official record, the pressure of the previous night's psychological breakdown held. Chikatilo confessed to 36 of the 38 murders the investigators had connected to the manhunt. The years of dead ends and biological mismatches were finally over, as the suspect began detailing a decade of slaughter just hours before he would have walked free. Chikatilo provided an exhaustive account of every murder on the charge sheet with details that matched the forensic evidence perfectly. His memory of the killings was precise. When the investigators pushed for specifics, he was able to produce rough sketches of the crime scenes. He drew the exact positions of the victims' bodies and noted specific landmarks near the sites, proving he wasn't just confessing to get the interrogation over with, he was reliving the events. It's still, it's not as, it's not as graphic as the first 2 parts, but it still kind of messed me up how sick he was.
Also, they must have left out some details in the paper, because normally you do, don't you? Because you keep some details close to heart so you can catch them. So we probably don't even know all of the details of these killings.
What do you mean by all of the details?
Well, there might be more like graphic things they haven't just told, like they haven't released, that only he would know. And it just makes you feel a bit sick, doesn't it? Like, what? Like he's describing these things in detail. So, like, I don't think I could hear it as an exact, like, if I was sat across from him and he's describing how he murdered and like tortured these poor kids, it must be so hard to hear. And especially if he gives you, like, he's probably given them more details that they didn't even know about, because they're not going to know everything, are they? And he's telling them like literally everything he's done.
Yeah, and he's probably like describing, there was a leaf next to me, like just ridiculous details that he would remember.
I have a question about him not confessing to every crime that they wanted to charge him with. So, like, didn't he just commit this other two, or why would he hold back on two?
So there were some murders he was suspected in, but it was probably not committed by him. The thing is, there were a lot of murders that we kind of discussed last time, which was not as similar to the style or to his MO, but they still thought it was him. And also there were murders they thought it was somebody else, because like he would gouge out his victim's eyes at the beginning, and then after a while he would stop doing that. And this is why they thought that he wasn't the one committing a certain amount of murders. So I would assume there were murders that they thought he committed, but at the end it was somebody else.
Also about the psychiatrist, I think there is just something so disarming about a person seeing you fully and clearly, because like he's been interrogated, like, I mean, at that point for 9 days, and he wouldn't budge. But just this guy seeing him for what he was, or who he was, just did the trick.
And also, he, as you said, he has seen him for what he was, and he's been hiding that for such a long time, probably since he was a kid, who he really was. And then there was this person who see right through him on every level.
Do you think it's just because he wanted to be understood and seen?
Maybe. So what I was saying is it was probably a massive relief for him that he met someone where he didn't have to hide at all.
It makes sense. Like it happened with a lot of other serial killers, when they just meet someone who is, I don't know, like not welcoming, it's actually a really wrong word to say, but someone who understands them, they just cannot stop confessing.
Yeah.
Do you think he was also like proud of what he did? And you've got this psychologist, like you were saying, like someone who's actually seeing him, because he's been faking who he is for his whole life. Like he's going home to this like wife he's not really interested in, not fulfilling like his sexual desires. Then he's got this person opposite him telling him, this is who you are, I know who you are. And then also like maybe feeling, yeah, actually I'm a bit proud of these killings, because no one's been able to capture it.
I don't think he was proud of it, because he was ashamed of a lot of things in his life. And I think he was ashamed of who he was 100%, because he wanted to become. So in the first episode, we talked about how he wanted to become someone, because he came from a very poor family. His mother would all the time shame him for bedwetting, etc., etc. And then the problem started with his impotence when he was a teenager. So at every turn of his life, he was ashamed of who he was. And when he had really good grades in school and he was going on to the best university in Moscow, he was finally proud of himself that he was going to become someone, but his grades just weren't good enough. So he was ashamed of that as well, that he didn't get in there. So I think when he was committing these murders, he definitely would feel that sense of achievement or sense of success, but then right after he would be straight away really ashamed of the monster who he was, I think. Chikatilo's confession laid out the mechanics of his violence. He explained that he frequently used rope to tie the hands of his victims, especially the males, behind their backs before starting the attack. His method was methodical and escalating. He would start with shallow cuts to the chest before moving to deeper, more violent stabs and slashes. By the time he was finished, most victims had between 30 and 50 separate wounds. He described the process of eviscerating his victims while they were still alive, staying on top of them until he reached orgasm. Over years of practice, he claimed he had become skilled at dodging the blood as it sprayed from his target. Once the violence was over, he would sit or squat next to them, watching and waiting for their hearts to stop. He admitted to the investigators that the cries, the blood, and the agony were what finally allowed him to feel relaxed and satisfied. When Kostoyev asked why Chikatilo had stopped gouging out his victims' eyes in his later murders, switching instead to stabbing or slashing them, Chikatilo admitted he had been motivated by an old Russian superstition. Initially, he believed that the final image a person sees is permanently burned into their retinas, meaning his own face would be imprinted on the eyes of the dead. He had been enucleating his early victims to destroy that evidence. However, as the years went by, he realized it was just an old wives' tale. Once he stopped believing his reflection could be found in a corpse's eyes, he gave up the effort of removing them and settled for simply mutilating them. It's still not easy to read this, I have to say. Chikatilo made it clear to Kostoyev that while he didn't consider himself homosexual, the gender of his victims didn't matter. The arousal came strictly from the blood and the mutilation. He admitted to tasting the blood of the people he killed, describing a sensation of chills that made him shake all over. The details of the attacks were animalistic. He confessed to using his teeth to tear at genitalia, lips, nipples, and tongues. In some cases, he would bite or cut off a victim's tongue while they were being eviscerated. Then, around the moment they died, he would run in circles around the body, holding the severed tongue in the air.
Like, I feel sick in my stomach, Rika. You're giving me nightmares, like, I swear.
I'm sorry. As I said, I don't feel good reading this either. It's absolutely horrible.
It's just just the fear. I've got this thing about fear and like children being scared, and imagine just being in that situation, these poor kids, and you're already scared, you're terrified, you've just been literally abused to hell, and then seeing your abuser run around you like it's some sort of joke, that you're in so much pain. Oh, this man, like, just it's just the worst one we've ever done. He just deserves to like burn in hell for all eternity. It's such a hard thing to hear.
Hopefully there won't be any more graphic parts. I can't really remember because I've done the research like ages ago, but hopefully it's almost done. So he also admitted to chewing on excised body parts, specifically the uteri of female victims and the testicles of the males, though he claimed he usually threw those parts away afterwards. However, he did confess to actually swallowing the tongues and nipples of some of the people he murdered. Jesus. 4 more charges hit on the 30th of November, covering the 36 deaths Chikatilo had already confessed to, a timeline of blood stretching from 1982 to the month of his arrest. But as the questioning continued, the count kept climbing. He started handing over 20 more bodies the police didn't even have on their radar. Some of these victims were buried in different regions outside the Rostov Oblast, and others were just missing persons whose remains had never been located. The most damning admission was the murder of Yelena Zakotnova. So she was the first victim. By confessing to her death, Chikatilo forced the state to face a massive failure. They had already solved that case years ago by executing Alexander Kravchenko, innocent man.
I think they wish he didn't confess to that one.
I'm definitely 100% sure about that, yes. Like, imagine that you're already failing for like 12 years, not being able to catch someone. And then this comes back right in your face.
I can imagine them. I can imagine him telling them, that's like, oh yeah, and I killed Yelena, and then they're like, are you sure? Like, maybe not.
Are you 100% sure? But yeah, and actually, if I can recall that one, he actually bought a second house and he done the murder there. Like, he would buy this little house in the woods, and I think her bag was dropped somewhere nearby his house. So I don't really understand how they haven't connected the dot when he was arrested.
He didn't really care much for covering it up.
Sorry?
He didn't really care much for covering it up.
No, he would just throw like dried leaves on the bodies as well after he was done. So he never really cared about burying the bodies or anything like that. Until the moment when he was arrested and they kept him in for stealing something for a couple of months. Well, he was arrested for a year. He was supposed to spend a year in prison, but then he was let out after a couple of months. And then after that, he was a little bit more careful. And that was when he would start committing the murders far away from the Rostov area, which made the manhunt even harder for the police as well. By the 20th of August 1991, the interrogation phase was over. The police had finished the grim work of taking Chikatilo back to every crime scene to have him walk through the mechanics of each murder. With that record complete, he was moved to the Serbsky?
Sorry, hold on. I'm almost there. So, Serbsky. Serbsky.
So he was moved to the Serbsky Institute in Moscow for 2 months of psychiatric testing. The goal was simple: determine if he was legally sane enough to face a courtroom. Senior psychiatrist Andrei Chikatilo, is that correct?
Tkachenko.
Okay, I'm not even going to try. Handled the evaluation. He found evidence of psychological issues that he traced back to brain damage sustained before birth. Looking at the timeline of Chikatilo's life, say it again?
I know here I'm very confused because I don't know if I'm supposed to pronounce it in Ukrainian way or in Russian way, because like this is Soviet Union, so it should be
Whatever way you
Tkachenko.
pronounce it, it's going to be certain than mine.
Okay, Tkachenko.
Described a slow, consistent slide into sexual perversion. This descent was fueled by a mix of biological defects and the environment he grew up in, eventually reaching a point where Chikatilo used extreme murderous violence as a way to vent internal pressure. The final report was issued on the 18th of October. Chikatilo was diagnosed with a borderline personality disorder and noted his clear sadistic streaks, but the conclusion was firm. Chikatilo knew exactly what he was doing. He was declared fit to stand trial.
I like how you avoided using the last name of the
I can't be
by changing it to passive voice.
2 was enough. Right, so the trial began in Rostov on the 14th of April 1992, with Chikatilo facing 53 counts of murder and 5 counts of sexual assault. This was the first major media event of post-Soviet Russia, and the atmosphere was volatile. Because of the risk of being lynched by the grieving families, Chikatilo was confined to a specifically built iron cage in the corner of the courtroom. The first 2 days were consumed by Judge Leonid Kubzanov.
Okay, I'm trying to read it because like it's so weird in Latin letters.
Kubzanov, okay. Reading the massive list of indictments, a process so graphic that relatives of the victims frequently fainted or collapsed in the gallery. I'm surprised that nobody took a gun with them. I don't know, like, if anyone, if like having a gun was legal, probably not, but I can imagine there were relatives who were working in the military or the police or something where they would have a gun, and I'm surprised that nobody took one in the courtroom.
I mean, yes, but at the same time, it was 1992, Soviet Union just collapsed, you know, and the whole country was kind of in chaos, and I think in general there was so much fear what's happening next. I mean, like, we literally, I know you didn't have that in Hungary, but in Ukraine and in Russia, like, we call that period like bad 90s, because like that was an absolutely awful time for everyone. People were like so poor, struggling, scared, and I think, you know, maybe that kind of was holding people back.
Maybe, but I'm just trying to like emphasize like being a family member of one of the victims. Like, imagine being in the courtroom and you have to look at this guy for hours and hours on and you can't do anything about it. Like, I would have been so angry, probably.
I'm surprised they didn't fumble with the case, because, like I said, because of the political situation.
Sorry,
Because
what?
he was literally, I'm surprised they didn't fumble the case because of the political situation. Because if you think about it, Chikatilo committed his crimes, and when he was caught in what year?
1990.
1990. So basically, he was caught in one country, but his trial was already in another. Meaning, like, he was caught in Soviet Union, and he committed his crimes in Soviet Union, but his trial was already in Russia. Like, not Soviet, because Soviet Union didn't exist anymore. So I'm very surprised that in that political climate, they still went on with the case like that.
Oh, I'm not surprised because his case was massive.
Mhm.
I mean, he killed 50 people, and
I mean, yeah.
And he went on for ages. And I think even the Western news got caught of it. So there was, what's that called? Before he was caught in March 1990, that's when the Soviet curtain has been sort of starting to collapse. And there was this glasnost where the press was finally free to broadcast what happened. So it was all public in 1990. So imagine that, how angry people were. I mean, I understand, there was a horrible era in history, but still, if someone murders your family member in the way he did, you would still be really angry and you would want justice. So I don't think there was any sort of chance on, putting this under the rug.
I mean, yeah, it makes
I'm
sense.
100% taking a gun if that was me. I'd just kill him right there and then. But then I also want him to suffer. I mean, I don't know what I would do.
I mean, I 100% understand why they put him in that cage in the courtroom. Right, where was I? The interaction between the judge and the defendant was openly hostile. Chikatilo was often dismissive when questioned about the specifics of his killings or the tricks he used to lure victims. He only showed real anger when he was accused of being a common thief or when the court discussed the organs he had removed from the bodies. Most of the time, he tried to derail the proceedings by claiming his family had been repressed by the state or by launching into disjointed, rambling speeches. When the judge grew tired of these diversions, he would openly mock Chikatilo, telling him to shut up and asserting that he wasn't crazy. As the trial dragged on, Chikatilo's behavior became increasingly unhinged. He would shout over the court, expose himself to the gallery, and sing socialist anthems until he was dragged back to his cell. His defense lawyer, Marat Kabibulin, repeatedly protested that the judge was biased and that the trial was a theatrical performance rather than a legal proceeding. Even the prosecutor, Nikolai Gerasimenko, eventually agreed that the judge's insults and procedural violations were compromising the case. In an unprecedented move, instead of the judge stepping down, he had the prosecutor replaced and continued the trial. In July, Dr. Bukhanovsky was finally allowed to testify, though only as a witness and not as an expert who could influence the verdict. He spoke for 3 hours about the psychological profile he had built years earlier. Following him, experts from the Serbsky Institute testified that they had been monitoring Chikatilo's behavior in his cell. They told the court that his demonic antics in the cage were a performance. When the cameras were off and the families were gone, he was calm and rational. They concluded that his courtroom behavior was a deliberate, calculated attempt to be found insane and avoid execution.
So basically, this whole thing, the feeling that he had when he met the profiler wore off. And I think he kind of understood that he was in big trouble. So he was trying to pivot. Maybe he understood that there was no way he could take it back. You get me his confession because he was so detailed. So he was trying to just get an easier way out.
Well, he wanted to be sent to a mental institution instead of being executed. He was definitely guilty. Everyone knew that. But he tried to act as he was insane, even though that other psychiatrist claimed that he was fit to stand trial.
And also the judge, I think he really wanted to be the one to send this guy to prison or to the, I don't know if death penalty existed at that point in Russia, to the point that he was like, yeah, if you're going to say something against me, I'm going to replace you.
Yes, but at the same time, he wasn't doing the case any favor because they could have just set him free for that, for the way he was acting, because he wasn't acting as a professional, was he? He would say, shut up and whatever.
I think he also had that feeling that he could get away with it.
Maybe, but that was the way he would have gotten away with it because the judge wasn't acting professionally. That was the issue. But I don't know what was going on. I'm just a little bit feeling offended that he would even try to act as a crazy person after what he done. Like, what was he thinking? That, okay, he goes to a mental institution and then what? Carries on killing people, or these urges are just going to, disappear after that?
I think he thought he was going to get away with it again because he's got away with it before. Like, he probably thought, if I just go to a mental institution and then I'll act like I'm sane and that I'm cured, they're just going to let me back out in a few years. I honestly thought he probably thought he can get away with it.
Don't think they would have let him out from there ever.
I guess at least he's alive though, that's the point, isn't it? He probably thought it's better being alive in a mental institution than it is being dead.
Or maybe he thought he could escape.
Yeah, that could have been as well. But I don't know. He's just a really weird guy. Besides the fact that he's a monster as well. He's a really weird guy as well, where he was. Anyway, on the 9th of August, Marat Khabibulin delivered a 90-minute closing argument for the defense. He opened by acknowledging that his words likely would not be heard over the public demand for retribution. He attacked the forensic evidence and labeled parts of Chikatilo's confessions as baseless, while again hammering on the judge's refusal to allow independent psychiatric testimony. Khabibulin argued that no sane person could commit these acts and formally requested a not guilty verdict. The next day, prosecutor Anatoly Zadorozhny countered by focusing on the psychiatric findings that Chikatilo was fully aware of his crimes and had actively tried to avoid being caught. He pointed out that in 19 of these cases, Chikatilo himself had provided the evidence. Zadorozhny then listed every charge and asked for the death penalty. When Chikatilo was given the chance to make his own final statement, he sat in silence. As the court went into recess, the brother of a 17-year-old victim hurled a piece of metal at Chikatilo's chest. When guards tried to arrest him, other relatives blocked them to protect the young man. I'm not quite sure what that means, hurling a piece of metal, like a knife?
Maybe like a pipe or something like that.
Could have been anything, couldn't it, I guess?
But that's something sharp.
Yeah, that's what I said. I'm not surprised about this at all. And I'm not surprised that the rest of the relatives didn't let the guards anywhere near this guy. On the 14th of October, Judge Akubzanov began a 2-day sentencing process. He found Chikatilo guilty of 52 of the 53 murders along with 5 counts of sexual assault. While reading the verdict, the judge took the opportunity to lash out at the authorities. He specifically targeted the prosecutor's department and Isa Kostoyev, calling them negligent for ignoring Chikatilo when he appeared on suspect lists as early as 1987. The final sentence was delivered on the 15th of October, consisting of death plus 86 years in prison. Upon hearing the verdict, Chikatilo kicked his bench across the cage and screamed abuse, though he again refused to speak when offered a final chance to address the court. The judge concluded by stating that the court had no alternative given the horrible misdeeds involved. Chikatilo was moved to the Novocherkassk prison to wait for his execution. He appealed to the Supreme Court of Russia, but the petition was rejected in the summer of 1993. 2003. After the Supreme Court tossed the appeal, Chikatilo made one last attempt at a reprieve by filing for clemency with President Boris Yeltsin. That final plea was rejected on the 4th of January 1994. The end came on the 14th of February 1994. Chikatilo was moved from his death row cell to a soundproofed room inside Novocherkassk prison. He was executed with a single gunshot behind his right ear. Following the execution, he was buried in an unmarked grave inside the prison cemetery, leaving no monument or public site for the man responsible for more than a decade of terror. So I would just like to say that what a coward move to not to say anything at the very end, even for your own defense, even just to, step up and say, yeah, I'm sorry for what I've done. Not even that.
I mean, because that would require confidence, you get me? And I don't know how to say, like some backspine, or you get me? I think he was just maybe processing that this is really happening. I really don't know.
I think you're right. I think he was just a coward. I think he knew everyone had done, he'd done this act, and he just couldn't own up to it. He didn't want to own up to it, and he just thought, I just think he was a coward.
It's just, he was already, he knew what was going to happen. He knew there is nothing else to lose. He knew there were these bunch of people there, these relatives and families, and the last thing he could have done to go out with dignity, at least. Although I don't think you can get your dignity back after what you've done, to the level what you've done. But still, just to say, hey, I'm sorry.
But maybe he wasn't sorry, and that was the thing. He probably wasn't even sorry, was he?
But even if you're not sorry, you can still say something. You can you get me, you can hold your head high and maybe say something, not in a way I'm sorry, but just say something. I think in that moment he felt very small, I think all of those feelings of being inadequate and ashamed and not enough, and all of the things that he's been struggling his whole life were really pressing on him in that moment, because here he was in the public eye, literally everyone saw him the way he saw himself and hated himself for it.
Well, yeah, because he's thinking, he thought he was a pitiful excuse of a man, and everyone else is looking at him yeah, you are. You're just a monster.
So yeah, I can't remember which one of you said, but that was an interesting observation, that this excuse for a man, this pathetic person, and you try your whole life to prove that you're not that person, in different ways, and this is how you go out, that everyone sees you as you saw yourself for your whole life. That's a little bit poetic or ironic, I guess.
Yeah.
But yeah, just that you basically try to prove to yourself that you're not that person, you're not pathetic, you can be someone, and at the end you prove it to the whole world that you are this pathetic person.
I wonder how it dawned on him, and I wonder actually if it did, but I think it should have, honestly. I think that's why he was silent.
Probably, but still.
But honestly, delusion that him pleading over and over again, even going as far as trying to get a presidential pardon, you get me? Who in their sane mind would think there is a chance in a million? I was wondering if he actually thought that it would work out, or he was just I'm not going to lose anything anyway. It can't get any worse, so I might just as well try. So I swear,
I'm wondering who. I don't know what happened to his family. I would assume they are under witness protection or something, or they had to change their names after all that came out, and they had to move, somewhere, because they probably weren't welcome in the community anymore. But I wonder, maybe his family tried to push the pardon rather than him, or maybe his lawyer tried that, I'm going to try everything that I can because that's what I'm being paid for. But sometimes I do wonder that being a lawyer and you have to defend someone like this person when you know he's guilty is why would you do it?
I just couldn't do it.
No.
I could not sit there in the courtroom arguing with someone that this man is crazy when you know he's not crazy. He's just a monster. Like, I think in a way they're just as bad as they are. And because you potentially could get them off. Do you know what I mean? What if they get off and, well, it has happened, hasn't it? Lawyers have got people off and then they're walking in the streets again. But yeah, it's just, I hope he got tormented and abused until his death date. But they probably didn't. They probably had him in solitary confinement, didn't they?
Probably, yeah.
I decided to check what happened to his family. Do you want to know?
Yes.
So his wife, she originally stood by him and even provided a false alibi for him early in the investigation, but later disavowed him, stating she was entirely unaware of his horrific double life. She changed her last name, shunned the media, and lived out her life in obscurity. Well, I guess she had to. Then his daughter, Lyudmila, she lived a very private life in Ukraine. I guess she moved from Russia to Ukraine to avoid the infamy of her father's crimes, largely fading from the public eye. And his son, Yuri, struggled with criminal record of his own. He was arrested for multiple offenses, including theft and rape, and later served prison time in Ukraine after being arrested in 2009 for attempted murder in Kharkiv. In 2025, misinformation regarding his alleged death fighting for the Ukrainian army was debunked by official sources. Well, that's according to Google Gemini.
Okay.
Oh, wow, then. So son almost was a chip off the old block then.
I mean, at this point, it does make you wonder if this is genetic, maybe?
Or like influential, obviously, wasn't it? I mean, he must have obviously after his father, because I don't know how old he was when his father got arrested, but he potentially could have got bullied, could have got shunned from his own job, depending if he was working. And maybe he just, I guess that's another story, isn't it, to go into. But yeah, like we talked about in one of the first episodes I joined, the question was, were they evil? Were they made, taught to be evil? I guess that's another thing for him, isn't it? If he's hearing all these horrible things his dad has done and people are potentially hauling abuse at him and his whole life it follows him, he probably thought, well, I'm just going to be the man that my dad was. I mean, it could have just been genetic, you just don't know. And you don't know what the home life was like for the children either. It could have been an absolute pants home life.
So it's interesting to think about because obviously he didn't know about what his father was doing for a long time until it all came to light, obviously. And I think at that point he was about, I don't know, teenage ages. I don't know exactly when he was born, but I think it was at the end of 70s or something. So he would murder all these people as his son, as his children were growing up, but his family didn't know about it because he was, traveling all the time. So yeah, it's interesting that was he born this way, the son, or the effect of the trial and finding out that his father was this horrible monster would have made him this way.
I'm sorry, I just read something insane.
Yeah.
So I went on Ukrainian Wikipedia, right? Because I thought I would find more there.
Yeah.
And first of all, his son apparently was in Afghan war and in Kandahar in 1990. So it's during the time when Chikatilo was in prison but not convicted yet. He and Soviet Union was still in place. He took part in a robbery of politicians, government officials, and he robbed them of $10,000, and he got 2 years probation. And then in 1996, so after his father was already convicted, Soviet Union collapsed, he came back
as well. Executed. He was executed in 94. He was executed
Yeah.
in 94.
Yes. So he came back to Rostov Oblast, where he was racketeering, and then he threatened his victims with the last name of his father. So he actively used his father's last name, Chikatilo, as a tool of putting fear in his victims.
Oh my God. Maybe he was proud of him and just he was on the same street. Maybe that's a whole nother talk for another podcast.
It gave him street cred.
Yeah.
Jesus Christ. Interesting. So I didn't really look into the family. I just sort of assumed that, if the worst human being ever is your husband or your dad or, your family member, then you would just change your name and move away from the area and try to live a quiet life. I thought that just what happened with his family, but that's quite interesting.
But again, in the 90s in Ukraine and in Russia, there was not really a possibility of quiet life, because there was no money anywhere. So basically, like the only people who made money were like politicians and people who did racketeering. You get me? Like, it was literally insane. So, like, I guess being a son of serial killer kinda was like, I don't know, an advantage to him in that point. But I'm also reading later what happened later.
It's like some weird claim to fame, isn't it? Like,
yeah, it's very weird. But hold on, like later, it's getting weirder. So according to Ukrainian Wikipedia, right? So, like I already said that he was using his father's last name, and then after that, he was convicted for these things for 2 years. And in 1998, 4 months after his release, he committed another robbery and he was sentenced to 6 years in like max security prison. After his release, he lived with his mother close to Kharkiv, which is like a very big city in Ukraine. And then in April 2009, he was arrested again for attempt of murder. We spoke about this briefly. And in general, he was in prison for about 12 years of his whole life. And the last sentence in the Ukrainian Wikipedia says that he doesn't believe that his dad killed 53 people. He believes that he was a patsy for unsolved crimes.
He thought his dad was basically just used as an excuse to stop the police being questioned.
Mutilating 50 children and women and young women and boys and girls.
I guess the only thing that would make him think that, I guess, is the fact that you remember when we talked about that there were people arrested for these crimes and they killed themselves and they were like kind of homosexuals or they were people with disabilities. Maybe he kind of thought, right, you've gone after like these people, you've targeted these people. My dad, clearly in his mind was some sort of weird hero. I don't know, because you don't know what the relationship was like. You targeted them, now you're just targeting my dad like a family man because you just want to blame it on somebody so you stop being questioned. But then I guess the other curious thing would be, well, once your dad got murdered and once your dad was in prison, the murders kind of stopped, kid. So it's kind of obvious it was him.
I think what happened here was that he probably visited, probably the whole family visited him in prison. And as you can see, the sister who was older and the wife, who was obviously an adult, they sort of estranged themselves from him, but probably the kid was still very young at that point, and he could have been manipulated into thinking that dad is probably just, in prison as a scapegoat. And probably his father told him that, oh, I'm innocent, I haven't done anything wrong or something. I can imagine that, when you're like a young teenager and your dad is your hero or whatever, and he tells you, oh, it wasn't me, then you would believe it, even that all the evidence are against it, what he says,
I guess the other thing is what's mummy telling you? Because even though she moved and she kind of thought, we've got to change our name, we've got to do this, X, Y, and Z, we need to pull away from him. She might have still thought he was innocent, and maybe she's telling him the dad was innocent.
His kids were born in around 1969, so his kids were adult when he was found to be a serial killer.
Sorry, you cut out then. How old were they?
Oh gosh, math. Around 20-something.
Oh, okay, still quite old.
Yeah, but still, when you're 20, and if you loved your dad, it's still easy to manipulate you into thinking that he's innocent. And he was the younger one, so if the girl was born in 69, he might have been even younger than 20 or 21.
Yeah,
I don't know.
He might have idolized his dad, and in that case, if your dad tells you you're innocent, you're going to listen to him, aren't you, really? But yeah, poor kid.
Well, he's not poor, is he?
Well, no. It turns out he might have been a monster just like his dad if they never caught him early. But I guess, again, that's the other thing, isn't it? That's another question for another podcast, did he the things he did have an impact on his son. Because imagine hearing that what dad did, because he would have heard it. It would have been all over the papers. It would have been like people would have been talking about it. He would have heard about it because his mum would have probably been chatting to someone about it, like lawyers and stuff. And like he must have heard all these things that his dad, or he thought his dad had done. It's really screw you up. At least they caught him early.
Yeah, I mean, I don't really know. It's I'm definitely going to research it, maybe for the next episode or at some point in the future. But I was thinking maybe we could do something lighter for the next episode.
Yes, please.
Murder and lighter doesn't go together, does it? But yeah, I mean, this one has been just, I don't know what it is. Well, all murder is horrible, obviously, and every podcast has been horrible because of the topic. But this one has just been soul destroying. I don't know what it is, and compared to the other ones, maybe because it was so many of them, and it was just, they're like, I don't know. It's just been really hard to hear, hasn't it?
Yeah. So I might just find something that's lighter. So yeah, it's not lighter, it's murder at the end of the day. But I think this one was the worst to research, and I thought when I started researching it that okay, this is the last one, it's not gonna get worse than this, and it's always got worse than the previous one and the previous one and the previous one, and it's just got worse and worse and worse and worse. And I wrote about 50 pages on this guy, and it was just never-ending horror. So I can definitely confidently say that he was the worst serial killer ever lived in history.
I hope he's burning in hell.
Yeah. I mean, I would have been, well, this is just hypothetical, and I'm not actually interested in it, but I wonder if he wasn't executed but just, sent to prison to spend his life there. As you said, he probably would have been in solitary confinement, but I wonder if someone would have gone for him in prison.
Yeah,
maybe even guards.
Yeah. There's guards over in like modern times, like today, like, accidentally leave doors open for rapists and pedophiles. So 100% a guard. I wouldn't have been surprised if the guards beat him up as well, because he is a piece of work. And I actually Googled him, and I just want to see his face, and he is just looking at him, you would never think he was capable of such evils, but he just looks like an average guy next door.
But I mean, how do you imagine someone who is capable of this evil? You get me?
Well,
they never do, because we all look human.
I don't know. That's a really good question. That's a good question for the next podcast.
It's not like he would be wearing horns, right?
Well, he's wearing something. He just looked like a sniveling man. Like, I don't know. It's just an evil man, isn't he?
This is really like a cruel thing to say about anyone, but he does have the expression that he is a pathetic excuse for a human being, like especially the one with after his arrest, where he's trying to, like, he's behind the bars, behind the cage, and he's trying to act that he's insane. I mean, it's just ridiculous. Like, give the families the courtesy of, you kill their family members, at least, be a human being for that whatever time.
He didn't even just kill them. He tortured them, mutilated them, agonizing, painful deaths. He's making me feel sick. I actually generally, the amount of times I felt sick during this podcast is crazy. Literally, like Roderick said at the beginning, didn't she? She was making me feel sick. I'm it's just awful. I think his death was too easy, personally.
I definitely think. I mean, I don't want to say that I'm kind of hoping, or I was kind of hoping that he would have to go to prison, and wonder if someone would have gone for him, because I think that would have been something he would have deserved more. I don't know, I might end up cutting this out, because who am I to judge? But I feel like that shooting him in the head was not a heavy enough punishment for what he'd done.
I mean, I agree. Maybe we should edit that out. But at the same time, I do think shooting in the head was an easy death compared to what his poor victims had to face and had to endure in their last moments. It's just sickening, isn't it, really? But again, no death would be good enough for someone like that, would it?
This was enough for today. So this was Start with the Weird, and this was the last episode of Andrei Chikatilo's case. We were Stacey, Roderick, and Reika. Don't forget to hit like and subscribe so you don't miss the next episodes. Bye!
Bye!
Bye.